Good day, I'm Vincent Saxtetter, and this is the After the Age of Fire channel. This is episode 52, recorded on June 21st, 2026, and it should be released on July 4th or so. The title of this episode is How to Defend Against Technocracy and Against AI. And also I'll have some discussion of, is intelligence really what makes us human? So first let's back up and say what this channel is about. This channel is a prepping channel. It's meant to help you and your family line to flourish and thrive and reproduce in the coming era. We're ending one era of about 250 years during which the human race multiplied its consumption of just about everything every 22 years. So that meant that each generation had about twice as much of everything as its parents did. This is averaging over the whole human race. We're coming to an end of that era, and we'll soon transition into another era in which we won't be multiplying our consumption anymore, and in fact we'll be consuming a little less, about half as much energy and other resources. So right now we consume about 60,000 calories per person per day. This is averaging over the whole human race. Of that, about 15,000 calories comes from food, fodder, and wood. Another 41,000 calories, the lion's share of our energy consumption, comes from coal, oil, and gas. And another 5,000 comes from what we call the renewables. This will reduce to the level that we were at around 1970. About 30,000 calories per person per day from an assortment of all the usual suspects. So if you want to review our energy, how much it costs, and how much we'll be able to get after easy oil, easy coal, and easy gas are no longer available, then go back to episodes roughly 10 to 38 in this channel, which discussed all the energy sources. Starting on episode 39, so about 14 episodes ago, we started the second section of this channel, which is about how to recognize the transition between the two eras, between the era of doublings and the coming era without doublings and with a little less consumption, and where are we in it today. So episode 51, the episode just before this, was about technocracy and AI. So overall, for several episodes we've been talking about whether the human race is accelerating towards something, and is there a sign that we're prepping for some sort of reorganization to match the new conditions that we'll be living under, and there's no sign that we are doing that. But along the way I made passing reference to AI, and because you have to discuss AI if you want to discuss where the human race is and whether it's accelerating. And so I took that up more seriously in the previous episode 51, and now I'm finishing the discussion in episode 52. In 51, the big point of episode 51 is that AI is not really a revolution in itself. It's just one more step in a long progression that we've been following towards a technocratic way of organizing ourselves towards technocracy. So that means that for many years, centuries, we've been pursuing a program of action where we continuously create more and more specialties. People specialize in specific professions, and within those even smaller specialties, we develop best practices that everyone in a profession follows, and then even more best practices for specific people and specific companies and so on. We produce bureaucracies, and we do a lot of data gathering and surveillance and control based on data, and the data informs decisions, so we have data-based decision making. This has been going on for centuries. It involves, of course, if you have data, you have to think about what to aim for and how you want the data to improve, what's good data and what's bad data, and so you create metrics. A simple metric might be just simply income, but there are many others, say standardized test scores for students. And you create these metrics, and you look at the data every which way, and you gather as much as you can to try to continuously improve these metrics. That's the technocratic program that we've been following for centuries. It's resulted in all sorts of best practices, things that we think are responsible for producing our growth and our well-being. It's also produced chain stores, big box stores, a general homogenization of the human race and of our experiences, our cultures, erasure of languages, and so on, all across the world. And my point is that this has been going on for centuries, and AI is just one more step in this. AI, just like is just one step of sort of refining the data analysis. It still requires a lot of people to be involved in the analysis, but it's just one more data analysis technique as far as the technocratic state goes. And it has the same characteristics of bureaucracy and so on. With bureaucracy already, there's a tendency to lose responsibility, so that no one person has responsibility for anything particular getting done or for any particular decision. Instead, there are paper chases and endless complications, and things are not really up for debate because it's all been enshrined in procedure. And with AI, you lose, you have even less insight into how AI arrives at its decisions, its evaluations, and there's no responsibility because the AI made the assessment or the decision for you. So it's just one more step forward and along this trajectory, and I also discussed the long-term degradation in our ability to communicate in this society, which originates at least partly by our media and our choices of what to communicate about being based on metrics and on technocracy, informing us of what would be a popular book to write, and then somebody writes it, or better, 100 people write in that genre, and suddenly we have an overflow of romance novels, or of mystery novels, or whatever. Keeps going like that, and communication is turning. We're losing the ability to dialogue and to communicate. We're losing the level of our level of communication is really dumbed down to where it was 50 years ago, 100, even more than compared to 100 or 150 years ago. And more what we're doing is not dialoguing or relating or really communicating. Instead, we're interacting or manipulating each other, or being manipulated. And then I mentioned that a key part of how AI specifically works when it's generating language is it takes all of the human corpus of human knowledge, and it's all been gathered and is under private ownership. The public gets to see some of it, but in general, the world's huge databases are not publicly visible, even though they contain all sorts of information about you and me and what we've said and done and listened to. And anyway, AI, there are these databases, and AI puts it all in a blender and free associates, much like what you do in your when you're dreaming. It finds associations between words and other words, between sentences and other sentences, topics and other topics. And so if you speak something to it, it free associates until it comes up with something that seems roughly reasonable as a response. And there's a problem with this way of reasoning. There are many other ways of reasoning. In this one, if you follow it only, which is all that AI can do, basically imitating and free associating around a database and plagiarizing, then this is the same logic which in human experience commonly, generally results in conspiracy theories and UFOs or occult, and even can make us especially receptive to demonic influences. It's great to have this sort of ability to detect connections, being able to notice connections without being able to reason with them about them leads you, and makes you ripe for all sorts of delusional, hallucinatory thinking, and worse, acting. And then finally, I mentioned that because the whole corpus of human knowledge has been gathered into these huge databases, and it's put in possession of global entities. And I mentioned that Pope Leo, in his recent letter Magnificat Humanitas, said that this is stealing, that our data about us belongs to us, not to the global databases. So there's the grand theft of a massive scale. But and I said I would agree with that in some sense, and I would go further. If you want, I'm not going to expand on that here. It does look like an extraordinary situation and needs a reset. But the problem I want to point out is that, first of all, we're becoming more and more illiterate, but at the same time we've this global corpus of all human knowledge about how to get anything done, and all our literature, much of our speech, and a lot of video about us, it's ripe for being rewritten by AI, and being corrupted. And in fact, AI is also adding to it, so it's adding its own inventions, which an AI reasons without any sense of truth or beauty or goodness or justice. So the stuff that it generates is not of the same quality as what we generate, and in fact we are using it to write our emails now, and to communicate to each other, and to generate movies and novels and our scientific literature. And so but also it can just go after the fact and rewrite everything from Moby Dick to the Bible, to Dante's Divine Comedy, and I'm sure that it will. In fact, we'll get many versions of them, and the likelihood is that we'll eventually lose a lot of the human corpus because of this confusion. So it's also a great way to censor. So that's some of the issues that are raised in the previous episode, and now I want to talk about how to defend against AI and against the technocratic progression. We've followed this as far as it can go, and we've boxed ourselves into a corner, and we don't know how to get off this progression. Well, I want to sketch some things that will help us get off this path, but it seems like there's a momentum here, and it'll be very difficult to do it voluntarily, except for individual people. Now, I want to mention, as I launch in here to this episode 52, which I remember I remind you is about how to defend against AI and against the technocracy. I want to remind you that Pope Leo wrote this letter about, and he was dwelling on problems that he saw with AI in particular. Though I think his letter is really more about technocracy, about the way that we're being optimized to meet certain metrics. And he mentions AI repetitively, but it doesn't seem to me that that's really the main topic. AI is the newest, sexiest word associated with this technocratic evolution, and what he's really targeting is the whole technocratic agenda. But his answer to the agenda and to the problems that he sees is I don't particularly like his response, because it seems to me like he just suggests over and over. It seems to me that he suggests that the solution is to regulate some more, to develop better practices, to refine, as far as I can tell, refine the technocratic agenda, to alter it, but to really make, to improve it, and so just to carry the technocracy one step further. So on the other hand, the issues, the problems that he raises, they're great. I think he has a lot to say there, but his solutions look to me like, more intervention from the UN, more regulation, more organizations, more rules, more human rights, and that's just carrying the whole agenda one step further. I don't think that's the answer anymore. And with all due respect, and I'm a Catholic, and a Roman Catholic, and I do try to respect and honor the Pope, but that's just my response right now. I don't see that. I can see that he has many of the right concerns. I just don't see that his answers are helpful. So how do you fight AI? How do you fight the technocracy? Well, some good news, first of all, is that it's not nearly as powerful an opponent as we might think it is. And I've discussed this in this episode and in the previous episodes, that there is a resource and energy limitation on our computation, and also on our data collection, on all our devices, our cell phones, our tablets, our TV cameras, CCTV, and so on, our data centers. We're no longer doubling their efficiency or the speed of our computing or our ability to store data. The only thing we can do is make more devices at this point, make more hard drives, make more cameras, make more computers, and all of them each one costs more energy and more resources. So at this point, if we wanted to multiply our computing abilities, or our data storage abilities, data analysis abilities by, say, 10, we would have to spend roughly 10 times more energy and roughly 10 times more resources. Now, maybe it would be only 5, okay? But we're at that point where we're not getting factors of 10 for free the way that we were for several decades, starting around 1965 until sometime around a decade or two ago. We were getting factors of 2 for free basically every 2 years or so. That era is gone. If you want computing power now, you have to pay for it. You don't just wait 2 years to get twice as much. Okay, and we're already near the limit of how much we'll ever be able to spend on computing power and data analysis power, data storage, communications, and so on. We're somewhere near the limit of what we're, compared to all the other things we need to spend our energy and resources on. We're somewhere close to that limit. Okay. Another limitation, of course, and I've discussed at length that we're actually going to have less energy available in the coming era. We'll have about half as much. So we'll have less energy available to give to computing and to the technocratic apparatus. Okay. There'll also be in coming episodes, in the rest of this channel's content, I'll be discussing in detail about how the world will, as we have less energy, easy energy available, the world will fragment. The present way that the world has become very organized at an international level and also at a national level, the way that languages are being cultures are homogenized and languages are disappearing. That's based on there being a glut of energy. energy, having extra easy energy, allows people to organize things on a global basis. When you have less energy, the most efficient way to get things done is locally. So we'll have a fragmentation of the world, and also things will become more precarious. They'll change from decade to decade and from year to year. And modern high tech it relies on global cooperation, global research and development, global supply chains and trade and economies integrated around the world. It has very fragile supply chains, and it's fragile against conflict and resistance. Okay, so overall, the world will fragment, the energy supply will reduce, and also AI and technocracy in general tends to foul its own nest. I discussed this in an episode earlier called Modern Civilization's Feet of Clay, something like that, analysis, and that was discussing how the reasoning technique that we call analysis tends to generate a Tower of Babel effect. And eventually you get some very quick dividends, but after a while you find that you work a lot and get infinitely more complicated and get very little for your return, because analysis confuses things in the end. And AI has a way of doing, in technocracy, they have a similar way of fouling their own nest. For instance, AI is generating content that goes on the web, and so then other AI will read that content and will think it's true, or act as if it's true. So you can get things that nobody had written, that eggs could be cubic, for instance, could be cubes, right? Or that hens could lay cubic eggs. I'm just giving a wild example. Nobody had written that. And then one day some AI happened to write it and put it on the web, and then from then on, all the other AIs are reading it, and now it becomes generally accepted that under certain special circumstances, a hen can lay a cubic egg. I'm not serious that this has actually happened with cubic eggs, but there have been similar things done. Okay, so overall, what we're going to see is that AI is close to its limits right now, and there will be an overall reduction in its abilities. We won't get that much further with it, but nonetheless, it may be forced on us anyway. So we may be required, if we want a job or to get into school or whatever, to do our job interview with an AI bot. Okay, we may be submitted to predictive policing, where I might be predicted to be more likely to commit crime, maybe even a specific crime, and therefore detained or imprisoned or penalized in some other way, required to take a certain psychiatric drug in order to reduce my likelihood of committing crime. Or on the other hand, I might be judged to be less likely to commit crime in my neighborhood, less likely to commit crime, so therefore the police won't police my neighborhood. Or AI may be used to drive our education system and organize it and our whole system of how people advance along their careers. Okay, so the point is that if AI products are not completely attractive to us, so I get so I find I'm not that interested in a particular insight that AI is offering me, or a particular piece of direction that it may be offering me. If the carrot doesn't attract me, then people may start using the stick, okay, and be forcing me to consume AI and to interact with it. Okay. So how to defend against this. Okay, well, I already discussed in the previous episode 51 about top-down control. In other words, efforts to use the computing apparatus, the sensors and the databases, data centers, and AI to surveil and control us. And I discussed toward the end how to defeat it. And I'll actually repeat several of those points, not just not as just as a response to surveillance and control, but all of AI is vulnerable to some of the same points that I made about surveillance and control. One of the points is just don't cooperate. Form relationships and communities with people that really you can depend on, who are men of their word, and you can trust. And if you have, and also be a person who's trustworthy yourself. Don't be an addict. Okay, if you're not an addict and you can and you do participate in a community of people that you can depend on, then you individually and the community as a whole can abstain or resist or disrupt whatever AI is being pushed on you. And then another way to resist is just to go on the land, get out of the city. AI does much worse at surveilling and controlling you when you're on the land. Okay, the whole technocratic computational infrastructure doesn't work so well there either. Now I want to say a word about jobs, okay, before I come back to the points I just made about how to resist. Many of us, our jobs are vulnerable to replacement by AI, or at least partial replacement, so that half of us will lose our jobs. Okay, and my thoughts about this are that if you in your career have followed a training and competence-based career path, in other words, something focused on a particular specialty, where you learned all the procedures, the best practices, the handbooks, the coursework, and the year-on-year training. If you did, and you just became very proficient in what, in what everyone is supposed to do in your profession, then you have followed the technocratic. You've become an instrument of the technocracy, and since all of this knowledge that you have absorbed and have implemented as well as you could is available to AI and ready for it to manipulate and absorb and imitate, because of that, you and your job are ripe for replacement. Okay, if you just followed that you chose a career, and then you did all the right coursework and got the right certifications and continued getting certified, then you've worked yourself into a dead end like the rest of society. On the other hand, if you did what probably apparently looked more or less the same to other people, if they weren't paying too close attention, if you became good at what you were doing, but if you went beyond the handbooks and the procedures and the training, and you developed a real expertise and a humanity and an originality, and you developed your own way of doing things, like a school teacher who has her own way of teaching in the classroom and handling in a particular flair and personality with her students, okay, and maybe even knows the students by name, and relates, and each student knows that she knows them, okay, then that teacher or you can be replaced. Sure, you can be replaced, but only at the cost of quality, of educational quality, or even of educational failure. Okay, So metrics-based technocratic teaching systems tend to produce much poorer students than ones where the teachers actually know their students and have their own ways of interacting with them and of teaching them and have their own ideas about how teaching should be done. And in fact, things are getting worse for the technocratic paradigm of education because we're slipping, it's now vulnerable to, I mean, AI is fouling that nest too, so the students are writing their essays using AI and reading their books using AI. In other words, not reading or writing. And there's, a technocratic paradigm will encourage the student to be ever more tuned to the modern technology and therefore ever more illiterate. Okay. So in particular, if I was talking about the possibility that AI may be and technocracy may be forced on us, okay, when it is forced, society will accelerate towards collapse. Okay, you get rid of the teachers who know their students, and you encourage the teachers who do the metrics-based teaching, and the students can tell whether the system cares whether they know anything, or if you decide the priority for your school system is that, as entire countries have done, is that at the end of high school the students, this is the only thing that matters, is their score on a particular test at the end of high school, then you can guarantee that your students are going to end up being functional idiots. Okay. So the more this is forced, the worse things will go, and the more quickly they'll go terribly wrong. So there will be feedback from reality. Okay. You can force it, but you'll have consequences. Now, this is all for the sort of desk job. If you have a job where you have to use your hands and eyes and feet and are in movement all the time or frequently, and you have to stretch yourself, you're pushing yourself to get things to lift boxes, or to prune that shrub, or to clean that window, okay, or to move that patient around the hospital. If you're really pushing yourself physically and you're in constant movement, and you have to use your eyes and your intelligence to think about what to do, it's not just moving sorting screws into different sizes or something, okay, then robots can replace your job, okay, they can, but they can do it only at a much higher cost than your real cost. Robots are enormously expensive. They're more expensive than the other kinds of machines that we make, and as I've already discussed in episode 10, and I've mentioned it again in other episodes, if resources and energy are at a premium, if you're trying to get something done with the least amount of resources and energy, or if it's just that resources and energy are just not as cheap as they are today, okay, then humans are better at just about everything. We're better at thinking, we're better at figuring things out, and we're better at getting just about anything done, even just moving things, heavy things around. Okay, if you wanted to move something around at the least energy cost, then you would use humans and maybe some horses or donkeys. Okay, that's it. You would not use machines. And even more so for things that go beyond just brawn, things that require some thought and some agility and so on, we're better. Okay, so in a world without easy energy, which is coming up soon, that's the big point of my channel, we're moving into a world where energy will still be available, but won't be nearly as cheap to us as the easy coal, easy gas, and easy oil that we have today. Okay. And in that world, humans will have an edge over robots, and in fact will have an edge over all the machines and all the factories. Okay. So this is a great way to evade the job problem. Okay. It's to do, I have to mention, it depends a bit on what sort of compensation you expect for your work. Okay. How to say this? If you expect to, if you suppose you are somebody who lays bricks to make a sidewalk, your job is making sidewalks, okay, and you expect that the way it will be done is that you will use a tractor, say a forklift and a backhoe all the time to move the bricks around, to move the sand around, and big machines will be used to do just about everything for you. You'll just be there operating the machines or watching while other people do it, okay? And if there's any possibility that you might hurt yourself in any way, or anything might go slightly wrong for your health, then that becomes a safety hazard and it becomes off limits for you and everyone else, okay? Moreover, you expect to have a retirement, you expect to be well compensated and have no job insecurity. Okay, if this is your sort of job, okay, then sure, you've just inflated the price of your work by, I don't know, a factor of 20 or a factor of 50 compared to if you were willing to do the same bricklaying. And bricklaying is not a dangerous job, okay, but if you were willing to take the bricks off the truck, and yourself, and or you were willing to flatten the ground yourself, put the sand down, and then put the bricks on top one by one yourself, okay, without all the heavy machinery. Maybe you still need a truck, you're still using a truck to move the bricks around, okay, suddenly you're doing it for a small fraction of the price, but you still should be able to get enough money for your work to be able to feed yourself and your family. But you aren't going to be living in the, I mean, why do you need to use backhoes and all this other machinery to do things that you can do with your own muscles? Okay, so what I'm saying is that if you're willing to live in the real world and use your real capabilities instead of expecting, and to take a little risk here and there about, maybe that things might, at the end of the day, you might feel a little sore because you've picked up 1,000 bricks today and moved them around, okay? Well, this is just human labor. If you're willing to accept that, then you have an edge over any machine and any robot and over AI, okay, that they'll never beat. So, in other words, overall, the job problem is really a matter of whether you've let yourself get boxed in. Okay, if you were a technocrat who just followed all the best practices and did as instructed, and maybe helped even invent more best practices, then you're ripe for replacement. If you're somebody who expects a lot of compensation for a little bit of for no human risk of your own, and for not much unpleasantness to yourself, not moving the bricks around yourself, for instance, then you've got yourself boxed in. Okay. On the other hand, if you're willing to use your full human faculties, your intelligence and your intuition and your physical strength and agility and hand-eye coordination, then you will always have an advantage over AI, machines, and technocracy. The only problems there are if energy is still easy to get. Okay, then society can waste energy on backhoes and things like that. Or another thing is that if society is willing to follow its technocratic agenda into disaster, then it may decide it can do without you for a while until it collapses, and then maybe you'll still be around to help build another society. So, more ways to resist technocracy and AI. I already mentioned these briefly. It's a very basic way that we're all going to be doing anyway as easy energy becomes difficult to get, is our main source of energy will no longer be coal, oil, and gas. It'll be the energy that we get from our crops and our forests and our work on the land. Okay, and so most of the human race will be moving out of cities and back to the land over generations. None of this is instantaneous. This transition is not instantaneous. It'll take generations. Okay, and on the land, it's really impossible to beat us. Okay, we're just better. We're better at seeing. We're better at. On the land and with limited resources, we get everything done better, and it's impossible to keep track of us the way that we could keep track of each other. Okay, because we are better at sensing, better at remembering, better at thinking about what we see and noticing things that we missed than anything else with the same resource constraints. And it's much harder. In other words, resource constraints are key. If you have an infinite amount of energy to build a camera for every square meter of land, and a computer to go with it, and so on, then you may be able to manage things on the land to a certain level of quality. Probably still not as good as what we could do if we were careful and thoughtful about it on our own, but the fact is that the amount of energy required to do that is enormously more than what the amount of energy that we have at our disposal, that we can function with. Okay. So, what was this note? And the second point is, again, build real relations with real persons who are near you. Don't waste time or attention on anything else. The more attention you give to AI, the more you're helping it grow. Okay, it needs your attention, it needs your data, and it's desperate for you. Okay, just don't waste time on anything that's not any person or anything that doesn't speak real words of faithfulness and truth. Okay, and build real communities. Okay, communities with their own thinking, their own favorite foods, their own dialects, their own systems of IOUs or currency, families and groups of families, and if you do that, these families and groups of families will feed each other. Okay, I mean, not just with food, but they'll give each other what they need, and they won't need AI. Okay, or the technocracy. They'll be able to keep it at arm's length, and if they need something that's say from Amazon, they'll be able to manage that relationship with Amazon. Okay. But they'll be able to manage it. It won't be there being managed by Amazon or by the technocratic state or whatever. Okay. Really key here is faithfulness. If you have people who are faithful to each other, who know each other, and who communicate, we actually, in terms of the communication that we'll have with each other, will make everything that AI does and the technocracy does, enables all of its communication, look pale and lifeless. So if you and your community don't give the technocracy and AI energy, your attention and your energy, then it'll just wither. Okay. So that's a few words on how to fight AI. then lastly, I want to say a few words about, after all, is intelligence what makes us human? Well, it has something to do with it, but my answer is no. It's only part of what makes us human, and it's not the most important thing about what makes us human. So a person is an I, a self, okay, who's able to perceive truth, beauty, and justice, okay, who's able to speak a word of truth, to hear a word of truth, and to keep faith with other persons, right? AI has nothing, no, and never will have any notion of truth, beauty, justice, or good, okay? It cannot begin to perceive what's true, what's beauty, what's beautiful, and what's just, what's good. And it can't begin to communicate about it or to keep faith. It's just a machine. Okay? It's a machine that operates by plagiarizing and by imitating. So another part of being human is our ability to build relationships of faithfulness and service and love, okay, and to not just interact and manipulate. The relationships between persons, relations where truth is the foundation, that's something we can do and machines cannot, okay. Another thing that's really crucial to being human is the fact that we're embodied. We aren't just minds, we're bodies. And you take away the body and you don't have a human, you don't even have, you're dead actually. Another one is that we're tuned. I've talked about tuning before in previous episodes. Tuning means that everything depends on, that the whole depends on every little bit. Okay, so every little bit of you is crucial to the whole's functioning. Computers aren't that way, and our computing infrastructure isn't that way. You can subtract a whole data center and you still have a computing structure. You can take pieces out of your computer and put other pieces in. It's you can turn off. You can destroy one cell phone and buy another and be back to where you were. Just pull down from the cloud whatever was in your previous cell phone. It's not tuned. It's human made. Intelligence involves knowing about truth, beauty, and justice, and this is which is completely inaccessible to AI. We can reason truthfully, and AI knows nothing about that, and we can reason with certainty. We can go from one thing to another thing with certainty and with a certain light or radiance, clarity, and AI doesn't have that. It just follows associations. And AI can imitate, it can follow associations, but this sort of reasoning, as I've mentioned before, leads down very dark alleys very quickly, okay, if it's not done in conjunction with other reasoning. You can be human, you can even be more human than others, even when you have very diminished intelligence. Okay. So babies inside the womb, a woman gets pregnant and everyone around her begins to reorganize and build community in ways that didn't happen until then. In particular, her and her spouse, hopefully, the father, okay, that the baby already inside the womb is making things change in a way that, and is exercising a talent that's a superpower. Other people don't seem to have that superpower the way that a baby does. And it continues even after they're born. Also, sick people, orphans, old people and immigrants, widows, bereaved people, all of these people are weak, okay? And they can still be very human and in ways that a genius may not be at all, okay? You even can have people who are really reduced intelligence, okay? Like people with Down syndrome, or there are other ones where people just, the person just will never be able to talk or understand, but is able to connect and communicate to some degree or other. One example is Angelman syndrome, which I mentioned in a recent episode. Okay, and you still have a person who's very clearly human, but seems to be unable to do a lot of, can do a very limited reasoning, but much of the reasoning that comes very, very easily to the rest of us is just not available to this person. Nonetheless, very, very human and can be a key to a relation to a community. So, intelligence is just one faculty that humans often have. Okay, all of us have some degree of intelligence. Okay, some of us, it's very hard, like somebody who's comatose, it's very hard to witness or to be sure that there's any intelligence left. But still, even without intelligence, you can have a fully functional, you can have a real human being, maybe not functional in terms of intelligence, but really carrying on a human existence in a way that's obviously human and may be key to a community. But lastly, the most important thing is that all of us humans were made individually by God. Okay? He intended you specifically. He planned your existence from before the beginning of the universe. He loves you specifically and knows you by name. Okay, and invites you into a relationship with himself, into some sort of communication. So I'm speaking from Christian faith there. I think I hold something in common with some non-Christians, but it's just a fact. That's the most core reason why we have a specific dignity. It's because God himself intended your existence. And not just your existence like the existence of a rock, but you as a person, and invites you into communication and a relationship with himself and with others. And that in itself, if God decides this, then it's done. You're human, okay? Whether or not he endowed you with much intelligence at all, whether he made you a genius or not, you still have the same, you're still a person, you still have a call to relationship, and you have all the dignity of being made as a single, irreplaceable human. So for more about this, about what makes us human and the dignity of being human, I recommend again Pope Leo's recent writings, Magnificat Humanitas, the grandeur of humanity, or the grandeur of being human. I also recommend other things like The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis, the Bible, and there are many other things you could read that would invite deeper reflection. In particular, throughout the rest of this channel, I'll return to these themes from time to time, and perhaps more and more frequently as the channel goes on towards its culmination. So, with that, I finished the episode. I wish you a wonderful week. If you know anybody who may be interested in this content, do invite them to join in, and please do keep coming back yourself. Have a good week.